I bet my life I'm a Diceshaker. Electric lights on a skyscraper. It's up and down.
Welcome to the Diceshaker podcast. My name is Jordan Brown. I am the host of the Diceshaker podcast. With me, as always, the man behind the scenes, Tyler Hartley. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jordan. We're back in our comfort zone.
We are back. We are back. We have football again. That was a dark month that we lived through there. I had to pretend I liked hockey for a little while. That was crazy when that had to happen. So yeah, we are back. Free agency has happened. Today is Tuesday, March 11th. So free agency is not. It's a weird thing. Free agency is not officially started. That's one of the first things I want to talk about. Is free agency starts on Thursday. Mm-hmm. This is all what they call the legal tampering period, which doesn't actually make any sense because if it's legal, then it's not tampering.
It's not tampering. Yeah. Fun.
And also doesn't matter because it's like okay, well now agents can talk to players, and it's like yeah, okay, like they're not doing that before. You know what I'm saying? Like some of these deals get announced like the minute that it goes in the legal tampering period. It's like, well, that was a fast negotiation. You guys hammered all that out in a minute? No. Clearly the agents were talking to the teams beforehand. So all of it's bullshit. But whatever. We got NFL news to talk about. We are going to go through not all of it, but a lot of it. The major points, the major takeaways. So we'll go through the individual signings and everything like that. But I first wanted to start with we got to set the table for how we're going to discuss NFL free agency in general, and then like specifically this year. So a point to understand about NFL free agency is I have a few things. The first thing is that the contracts are kind of fake. What I mean by that is, so different from like the NBA and baseball for sure, and maybe, I don't know, one of you hockey hardos can let me know if you guys have guaranteed contracts in the NHL or not. But NFL contracts are largely not guaranteed. There are some exceptions, Deshaun Watson, Kirk Cousins deals, that kind of thing. For all intents and purposes, they are not guaranteed. But what numbers get reported when they report these contracts, they report it like the highest possible value for the most possible years that the deal could possibly be. So, for example, you get a guy like Milton Williams. He signs with the Patriots after leaving the Eagles. His contract comes in at like 4 years, $100 million or something like that, $103 million, something like that. The guaranteed money on that is like $60 million. So that's all he's guaranteed to get. And until we get the actual confirmed structure of these contracts, so until we know how the money's allocated year over year, what's guaranteed, what's not, what's signing bonus versus salary, we don't really know. We don't really know what the value of these contracts are. So, because how it works is in the NFL, your cap hit, so the money that counts against the cap, is your salary for the year and your signing bonus. But your signing bonus is split over the length of the deal, right? So for example, I don't know this to be true, but let's just say this is how it works. So Milton Williams has got $100 million over 4 years. Really, it's $60 million that's guaranteed, okay? So now let's just say out of that $60 million, let's say 30 is signing bonus and 30 is salary. Again, just to use round numbers. So what that would basically mean is that $30 million in his signing bonus gets split. He gets it right now today, but he gets split over those 4 years. Mm-hmm. So his cap hit gets averaged out over those 4 years. But only the first couple years of the deal are guaranteed. So what that means is the Eagles can get off that deal in a couple years, and all that counts against their cap after that is the signing bonus. That's called your dead money because that's money you've already paid them. Yep. So they can get off it for, depending on how it's structured, possibly pennies on the dollar after a couple of years. So when people say 4 years, $100 million, it's like, yeah, maybe it's that. Mm-hmm. More likely, and you see this with other contracts, more likely it's probably 3 years at $20 million a year or so, right? 3 years, 60, right? That last year's probably fake. And that's what you see too with when you see teams, you'll see this thrown around that they restructure guys' contracts. So this happened with the Cowboys 2 weeks ago or last week, whatever it was. They restructured CeeDee Lamb and they restructured Dak Prescott. And basically what that means is they convert a bunch of their owing salary on their existing deals to signing bonus. So the player gets it today, so they're happy. They add on a bunch of like fake years, they're called voidable years, onto the back end of the contract, so that now they basically take the cap hit for the next 2 years and spread it across the next 4. And then that freed up like $50 million cap space for the Cowboys this year. And so all that just goes to say that the NFL contracts are kind of fake. The salary cap is kind of fake because you can get around it in a bunch of ways. So when we're talking about these numbers, just understand that when we're talking about they overpaid, the underpaid, you can't really evaluate that right now because we don't know the details of the contract, and basically every contract is less than what got reported. That is especially true in a year like this year in terms of the value. So again, for just people who get upset about, like, NFL free agency is like, it's like going to Wonderland, and it's like, why is this water $9? It's only $3 across the street. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, that might be true, but it ignores all of the context of like where you are in the situation you're in. Mm-hmm. The fact that like it's a fixed market and it's going to be $9 here because you're in Wonderland, you can't go anywhere else.
Yeah.
Right? So that's how that goes. And that's the same in free agency. So you see this, we'll use my beloved Tennessee Titans as an example. They signed an offensive tackle yesterday. And his numbers come out at like $20 million a year as his cap hit. Mm-hmm. And people are like, oh, that's crazy. That's higher than Lane Johnson's cap hit. It's like, well, yes. But you understand that the Titans didn't have a tackle. And there's only so many available. And so that means that guy who's not as good as Lane Johnson can ask for Lane Johnson money because the other option is you don't have a tackle.
Yeah.
And so that's just kind of how that goes. And that's even more so this year because the free agent class is not very good this year. Combined with the salary cap jumped a lot this year. So the new TV money is kicked in the NFL. So this is the extra money they're getting. This is why they have 18 games. This is why Amazon gets a deal. This is why there's games on Christmas. All this extra money comes in, drives the salary cap up. Very similar to the NBA offseason 2016. That was the year that KD left OKC and went to the Warriors. The reason that could happen is because the cap went up by so much that everybody had cap space. And that's the year you started seeing guys like Timothy Mozgov all of a sudden getting like 4 years, 55, whatever he got. You know what I'm saying? Like, because when everybody has money, there's still only a certain amount of players available. And oftentimes, ownership, fan bases are not comfortable with, okay, we're just going to sit on all this cap space. You got to pay somebody. And so guys end up getting more money than they're worth. Mm-hmm. And that's why good teams don't try to build their team in free agency, right? If you're a fiscally responsible person, you don't do your groceries at 7-Eleven.
Yes.
Because you're going to pay a lot more for worse stuff. That's how it is in free agency as well. You're going to pay more for worse players, especially this year. Because the free agent cost, like we came into this offseason thinking, okay, who are the top free agents? We're thinking T. Higgins, we're thinking Trey Smith, we're thinking Ronnie Stanley, and we're thinking Chris Godwin. All four went back to their original team. They're not free agents. And so that just immediately the quality in the class goes down. And then so then you get some guys that are, again, we can't evaluate if they're true overpays, quote unquote, yet until we know what the actual cap hits are. But yeah, you're going to get guys who are like, how's he getting that much money? Supply and demand, economics.
Yep.
There's more money available than there are players. That's just how that's going to go. So that's just kind of, as we go through these and we talk about, who made a good move, who made a bad move, whatever, we just have to understand that the contracts are fake. They're always inflated in free agency, and they're inflated even more so this year because of the increase in cap and just kind of a bad free agent year. Mm-hmm. Okay? Everybody good with that? All right. So that sets the table for how we're going to talk about it. Now, there are a ton of things to get to. I struggled all day trying to figure out where I wanted to start. And I think we got to kind of start, just at the initial transaction and then kind of everything that fell out from there. So I think the move that really kicked off free agency wasn't actually a free agent signing, it was a trade, which was Gino Smith gets traded to the Raiders for a 3rd-round pick. Do it from the Raiders side quickly. I think it makes a ton of sense for the Raiders. Obviously, they came in this offseason needing to do something at quarterback, right? The Aiden O'Connell, the Desmond Ridder, that's not going to cut it.
Yep.
I think early offseason, kind of right at the end of the season into just the beginning of the offseason before they had made a coach hire, it was thought that they might be a Shedeur Sanders spot, right? They have the number 6 pick in the draft. They thought maybe they have to trade up. Turns out now you could probably just get Shedeur at number 6. I don't think he's going to go before that. But once they hired Pete Carroll, that plan to me was obviously out the door. Just simply based on the fact that Pete Carroll is 73 years old. I do not think Pete Carroll would take that job if the plan was, hey, we're going to draft a rookie. We'll see if he's good. And if he is good, we'll see if we can build a team around him in the next couple of years, and then maybe we can compete. I just don't think Pete Carroll would be interested in something like that. I think it was once he took that job, it was very obvious, like, okay, they're going to try to be good right away. how good they're able to actually be, we'll talk about. And then on top of that as well is the Tom Brady thing. There's this thing out there. Bill Simmons is the father of this idea, and it's true, of new owner syndrome. So basically, the idea is that when a new owner comes into a sports franchise, they immediately want to make moves, right? Because if you think about it, there's only 32 of these things. It's very, very hard to own a team. If you do own a team, it means you're an incredibly successful, probably highly competitive person. And so let me just sit back and chill and wait and be cautious here is just generally not how these guys go. They want to make an impact right away, and you see this all the time, right? You saw it with I keep going back to the NBA, but the Phoenix Suns. They got bought by Matt Ishbia, and all of a sudden it's extend Devin Booker, get Kevin Durant, get Bradley Beal. Obviously it didn't work, but it was just a new owner being like, no, we're going to be good right now.
Yeah.
And just kind of how that goes. So it to me, the Raiders getting Geno Smith, clear upgrade on what they had, obviously. How good you think Gino is kind of goes back. It kind of just depends on how you think about football. If you're a numbers nerd type person, you want to get into the advanced metrics. You're in the Mina Kimes kind of school of thinking. You can make an argument Geno Smith was the top 5 quarterback last year. If you're more of like a traditional football guy, maybe somebody that leans more to the way I watch the game. He's probably more in that 15 to 10 range. But still, for a 3rd round pick, that's great. That's fantastic to get that level of quarterback for that long. Obviously, he knows Pete Carroll. They were together in Seattle for a year, so I think that the match there is good. They extended them. I think was it before that? Yeah, I think it was the day before that. They extended Max Crosby, who had a ton of trade rumors around him during the season.
Yeah, he was the highest paid
for
before Myles. Yeah, before the other one. Yeah.
But that was, I think, obviously the first signal of them being like, no, there's no rebuild happening here. Like, we were going to try to turn this roster into a competitor right away. And look, Gino's a step in that right direction. Tough division for them. Like, Chargers, Chiefs, Broncos, all seem to have their quarterbacks, all good. Like, it's going to be a tough division to compete in.
Yeah.
But they're going to try. It's very clear.
Do you think that's like more of a situation too, where it's like obviously you're not poised to win really like in the next few years anyway? So it's like you're just trying to get someone there to maybe attract some attention as well. Like let's get some more pieces in here. Let's make it like
I think that's probably
playoff push here.
I mean, I think that's probably the logic is they think that like, hey, Pete Carroll, Tom Brady, we can continue to get guys to want to come
exactly.
here.
Just add a little bit. Yeah.
But as we open the show with, as we pointed out, is like you don't want to make your living. Like free agency is not your like, oh, that's how we build our team.
Yes.
Free agency is used by two types. Like it can be effective for two types of teams. It can be effective for the team who has a star quarterback on a rookie deal and has a ton of cap space, and you can just afford to overpay guys. Or it's used where if you're kind of right on that cusp of being a contender, maybe you're at the bottom of tier 1, top of tier 2, and you think, it's an overpay, but one more guy can push us into really trying to go for it.
Yep.
That too should use free agency, and those are the types of teams that do it well. So just as like a year over year, like, oh, we'll just be players in free agency every year, it's like you're probably going to end up with an expensive, mediocre roster.
Yes.
You have to hit your draft picks if you want to build a winner in the NFL. You must do it. So we'll see. We'll see that from the Raiders. Seahawks. So might as well talk about all their moves while we're on it. So they trade Gino. Next day they come around. So they trade Gino for a 3rd round pick. Okay, so now there's no quarterback in the roster. Next day they come around. We'll trade DK Metcalf to the Steelers. DK had 1 year left on his deal. He gets traded to the Steelers. They add on an additional 4 years at I think total of $150 million. So he goes right to the top of the receiver market. We'll get to what that means for the Steelers in a minute. But so that obviously you trade the quarterback, you trade your best offensive player. Your best offensive receiver, I guess you could maybe argue like Kenneth Walker more. Tyler Lockett, they cut him. Like it seems like clear. Okay, they're stripping it down. It's rebuild time in Seattle. They're kind of they're kind of sick of being in this purgatory, this sort of 8-9, 9-8 world. But then they go ahead and they sign Sam Darnold, which doesn't make any sense if you're trying to rebuild, in my opinion, because look, Sam had his year, whatever, Sam Darnold is not the type of quarterback, whatever you think about Sam, however good you think he is, he's not the type of quarterback where you snap the ball and say, hey, Sam, make everybody around you better. He very clearly is cut from that Kirk Cousins mold of if you put the talent around him, he can keep the train on the tracks. Well, there's no train in Seattle right now.
I was thinking the same thing when I saw
what
that
is the
trade too.
plan?
I was like,
What are they
because it
doing?
seemed like it was offload rebuild, and then they bring in I mean,
and now look,
like you said, it's not guaranteed money. It's $100 million over 4 years.
It basically
so I'm
seems
not
to be
sure,
a 2-year
but-
contract. It's
so
2 years and we'll see. To me, like, but that's just okay, I guess. And so I get like if I'm looking at now, I guess their plan is they still have Kenneth Walker, so it's going to be run the ball 30 times a game, have Sam Darnold exist off play action, but like the offensive line is not good. Who is he throwing the ball to? Like they have to go receiver now in the draft and hope they hit that. So just a very confusing strategy out of Seattle so far to start this offseason. And so I think they're clearly, to me, has to be a quarterback in the draft they like, and I just based on how they're operating, it's got to be like a round 2, round 3 type of guy. Like, it's a Jackson Dart or it's a Jalen Milroe, or because they're not going to be able to pick Cam Ward.
Do you mean like they're getting Sam Darnold to like kind of, and then also bring this other like rookie quarterback?
That's the only thing that makes any sense to me.
No, I see what you mean.
Is that we're gonna we like let's say it's Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss, who's probably gonna go end of the first round, second round, somewhere in there. And they go, all right, we love Jackson Dart. We're gonna take Jackson Dart. We can't turn the offense over to Jackson Dart this year because he's not ready. So we need somebody to kind of keep the train on the tracks and who we can later bench without the fans going into an uproar. Right? Nobody's gonna start lighting things on fire because Sam Darnold's not playing.
Yeah.
Right? So that to me is the only thing that makes sense. And I guess, I mean, look, what's very clear is they didn't want to pay DK. And so anytime you have the team that has the player, that knows the player, drafted the player, he's been in their building every day. Anytime they're like, no, thank you, we don't want to pay the guy, it does give you a little bit of pause of like, oh, okay, maybe they know something. But from everything we can celebrate, maybe that comes out later, but from everything we can see right now, it looks like a great move for the Steelers, who end up with one of the highest potential for hijinks receiver rooms I've think of all time, with DK Metcalf and George Pickens in the same room. Like those guys are legitimately both psych, and like that kind of goes back to the Mike Tomlin. Like Mike Tomlin always has to have a crazy receiver, right? Whether it's Antonio Brown or it's Le'Veon Bell or it's Matavius Bryant or it's Chase Claypool. Like there always just has to be some. He's got receiver with an attitude problem in that building. But I really like the move for the Steelers. I think they're built the way. They still have to figure out the quarterback thing. It seems like that's where Aaron Rodgers is going. That's kind of where it seems.
That's
like
kind of where I see the
down. It
rumors
seems like
yeah.
it's down to the Giants and the Steelers, and I don't know why he would go to the Giants. So it seems like the Aaron Rodgers destination, and so they're going to be set up right. Like the offense last year for the Steelers was run the ball, deep shots. Well, DK Metcalf might be the best deep ball receiver in the league, and George Pickens ain't that far behind him. They win those balls at a very high clip. They are going to be able to continue to run the ball, and then if it is Aaron Rodgers that steps in there, it's okay. You got a little something there, I think.
I think my question would be then to you is, do you think Aaron Rodgers is in the way we saw him play last year? Do you think that's more of a reflection of what the Jets were, or do you think it's more of a reflection of maybe he's not much better choice than Russell Wilson is?
Well, I think it's a little of both. So I think unquestionably, right, one of the things that went wrong with the Jets and the Rodgers thing is the Jets are, we've talked about this many times before, they are who they are before they got here.
Yes.
They are the Jets. And so they had no strong culture. They had nothing established before they brought Rodgers in and made a big deal out of like, oh my God, we got right, running out with the American flag at the beginning and blah, blah, blah. And so when you don't have a culture, then you bring in a personality like Rodgers, who's accomplished so much and has such a strong personality. The culture is going to become the Aaron Rodgers. It's going to become whatever he wants, right? And so when that works, that's great. But he tears his Achilles on the opening drive in week 1, and from there you're just kind of behind the 8 ball the entire time. Obviously not the case in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has a very strong culture already. Pittsburgh is probably the most consistent franchise in the NFL. They have been varying levels of good for basically 50 years.
Yes.
They've had 3 head coaches in the past 70 years. The Jets have had 3 head coaches since last year.
Yeah.
Right? So there, and Rodgers is coming in as a different guy, right? He's not coming in as, recent MVP candidate, high-level player coming out of Green Bay. He's coming in as the disgraced, he's hurt, he's old, it didn't work in the Jets. He can't come in and just start dictating terms like he could when he was in New York. So I think from that standpoint, I think it could work for the Steelers. I think from a football standpoint, he fits. It depends how they do it, right? Like the way they played last year is the only way Russell Wilson can play, right? Is just off play action, throw the deep ball off. He's small, he's old, or he's not older, but he's smaller. He used to rely on his athleticism more. It's not there anymore. Whereas Aaron Rodgers is much more of a complete quarterback. And now how Aaron Rodgers likes to play the game is West Coast offense, timing routes. Everything happens on a certain schedule. Let me and my brain and my arm kind of find the mismatches and work from there. That's not how the Steelers can play. Mm-hmm. That's George Pickens and DK Metcalf are not sophisticated technical route runners. They are monsters on the outside who will win jump balls. So if they can find a way, and again, this is a theoretical, I haven't even signed the guy yet, but if they can find a way to blend that style of play, that run the ball, run action, deep shot style, and have a little bit of the West Coast quick game stuff that Aaron Rodgers likes to do, then I think, and with that defense, like, I don't know if they're a Super Bowl contender, but they will be good. For sure. They will certainly be good as long as they stay healthy. There's no question in my mind about that. To me, Rodgers is more akin right now to it's more similar to Kirk in that, like, both coming off the Achilles injury, but Rodgers still has that, like, it's not an A1 level, like, top tier arm like it was, but there's still plenty of juice in that arm when he can set his feet and let it go. So I think they can be very successful if that's the way that they do that. So I thought good move for the Steelers overall. I think assuming they get the quarterback pick right, I think they're set with that defense. And look, it could blow up spectacularly, right? Because of DK, they're crazy, and Mike Tomlin's got an ego, and TJ Watt, they got to do the TJ Watt extension still, like all that stuff's got to get free. But theoretically, they could be pretty good. It's very difficult to sit here in March and say this team is going to be good or this team is going to be bad because there's still so much offseason to happen. Yeah, but they've put themselves in a good position. I think that's a great trade for the Steelers.
I think it's like to what you said. You're just adding on quick. If it goes well off the beginning, I think it continues to go well. If it goes bad, it goes bad. Yeah. Like you said, like it's kind of it's just a product of like what is happening in that moment, and it will continue to go.
Hey, look, and like I said, they still got the TJ Watt contract down, all that stuff. So, but yeah, I would say if we're doing winners of day one free agency, I think the Steelers are definitely in that conversation. Okay, what else we want to talk about? So. We'll stick with the other receiver news that happened. So Davante, piggyback off Aaron Rodgers, his boy, Davante Adams to the Rams, who then subsequently basically told Cooper Kupp, "We are going to cut you." Great move. They had Stafford had explored the trade market previously and then re-signed with the Rams. I think he probably knew this was coming. He makes that move, and I think a really good move by the Rams. Davante Adams is like the exact opposite of a DK Metcalf type of guy, where he is a technical route runner. He's an absolute technician. He's one of the best ever at that, and that stuff ages really well. So I'm not as concerned about Davante Adams' age. Health would be a concern for Davante Adams. Like, as you get older, are you just going to be able to stay healthy? But in terms of are you going to be able to be effective, I think his skill set with McVay and then Stafford still got the goods. So I think that's and you add in Puka, who can. Like Puka and Cooper Kupp, they kind of overlap their skill sets a lot.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Yeah.
Whereas Puka and Davante don't, and how you want to build your receiving room kind of like a basketball team, where you don't want to have too many guys who do the same things. You want to kind of have complementary skill sets. Different guys do different things, right? Absolutely. So I think they're well on their way to do that. And then when you look at that NFC West, like we talked about the Seahawks, they just seem lost at sea. We don't know what the Cardinals are going to be like. You can't really trust them to put. They have to, they signed Josh Sweat. Like they have to really fix that defense. And then the other one is the Niners, who have taken. We talked about them being one of the most interesting teams coming into this offseason, in terms of kind of at a transition point, and everything they've done so far has been they are very clearly taking a step back and willing to strip this thing down with all the guys they've lost, and we'll go through that in a minute. But the Rams, to me, are clear favorites in that division now. Whereas at the beginning of this past year, I was the one banging the table saying the Rams are not good. So for them to have kind of figured that out, and looks like they're going to have another competitive window with Stafford. Again, do I think they're going to be Super Bowl contenders? It's too easy to tell. The NFC is kind of wide open. But I think certainly favorites in that division. So a good offseason for them there. And then interesting to see now where Cooper Kupp goes. Because there's still some teams out there that need receivers. The Patriots, the Chargers, the Raiders. And there's just not, like, we're kind of scraping the, like, you know, once Godwin went back to the Bucs, it's like, all right, like, Stephon Diggs, like, you know, like, it's all guys on the other side of 30 who are
I think that's the thing too. He's expensive, like, against your cap, against, like, if you sign him, and he's also getting older though too. So it's
Cooper Kupp?
Yeah, so it's kind of,
imagine he signs for a pretty small deal.
Yeah. Right? Like,
well, because he
got
paid out by, when they cut him, right? You get paid the rest of, like, whatever they owe.
Sure,
you.
yeah.
So, like, financially, I think he'll be able to take a pretty small deal somewhere. It's just, I think, you know, for them and a guy like Diggs as well, it's like, you know, where do you want to go, right? Like, I think San Diego, somebody's going to sign in San Diego. Cooper Kupp and Lad McConkey, their skills kind of overlap a little bit too much. So anyway, there will be time to talk about all that. But yeah, great move for the Rams there. So they're good. So we touched on earlier how Max Crosby was the highest paid player for a day. The reason he was the highest paid player for only a day is because the Browns extended Myles Garrett for $40 million per year. And that is, to me, one of the funniest transactions I've seen in a long time, because how that whole situation unfolded was Myles Garrett went to the Browns and said, hey, I would like to get out of here. I would like to win. It doesn't seem like we're going to be able to win in Cleveland. It's a bit of a circus around here. I'm just kind of out. So please, I would like a trade. And they said, okay, no problem, Myles. You go look for that trade. But in the meantime, how about $40 million a year? And then he said, I love Cleveland. And that just is what that is. And that's why we don't get NFL top tier guys in NFL free agency, especially this year, because everybody's got so much money and you can just hit them over the head with a dollar figure and be like, all right, come on back, Myles. So they keep Myles Garrett, which takes a lot of, I think, Commanders were interested in him. The Eagles would have been insane. They were rumored to be sniffing around him. I think the Browns probably put that price tag like very high. I think probably three first rounds and some more, which I think that probably had a little bit to do with it too, of just not that many teams willing to pay that kind of draft capital to acquire a player that you then have to extend. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So it probably made more sense for him to go back to the Browns. Just not sure with the Browns. I mean, they're obviously in a very interesting position. They have one of the worst contracts in the NFL in their roster. Who that person is not going to play next year. He may not play the year after. Who knows if he ever plays again. They also own the number 2 pick in the draft, but they need a quarterback. They traded for Kenny Pickett. I don't think anybody thinks that they're going to walk Kenny Pickett out there for 17 games. The name I have seen floated around a little bit earlier today was one Mr. Kirk Cousins, which would make some sense. You probably wouldn't have to trade a lot to get him, so you certainly wouldn't have to trade a lot to get him. Atlanta doesn't have a use for him anymore. They're fully on to Michael Penix. And I think for the limitation that Cousins has always had, and he even has more so now that he can no longer move, I don't think there's a better option out there as just as a stopgap 1 year. We can't be this bad again type of move. Yes. I think Kirk makes some sense there. So just keep an eye on that. I think Kirk to the Browns could definitely happen.
I think you're exactly right. Like, in the sense of, like, also they have no money. Like, they have nothing. Like, you know what I mean? So, like, yeah, you can make a trade, obviously, to get Kirk Cousins, but you're not going to acquire anybody.
I think part of it, too, for them, right, is the Browns are probably not thinking, like, hey, how do we win Super Bowls? More so when it's like, how do we get our fans not hate
exactly. Like, how do we still fill the stands?
Right. Yeah, which they will, because it's the NFL, but it's more of like, how are we not, like, how do we win press conferences? Like, how do we just get people in Cleveland could be excited this summer about something? And I think a way to do that, you trade for Kirk Cousins and you draft Travis Hunter at number 2. You get what some people think is the best player in the draft, super marketable, super exciting. Oh, he's going to play both sides of the ball. Cleveland's a great place for him to go because they'll let him do that type of shit. I'm like, sure, Travis, do whatever you want. Like, you want to call the plays too? Whatever, brother. We're just happy to have you. So I could see that. If they trade for Kirk Cousins and they draft Travis Hunter, and Myles Garrett didn't get traded. You could spin that as a successful offseason for the Browns, which I think is all they're trying to do.
Yes.
Is just let's not be laughing stocks again. Let's just have a competent offseason. And so I think they're well on their way there. All right, let's get into some teams who actually did some stuff. So let's start with the Commanders. Now, we talked about the Commanders as being one of the most interesting teams in this offseason, and one of those teams I talked about of they have the superstar quarterback on the rookie deal. They have a lot of money available, so now is the time to spend. Now is the time where you are okay overpaying for proven players, because even if it doesn't work, by the time you have to pay Jaden Daniels, these guys are off the books anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And so we see that with the Debo deal. Is Debo still the guy that he used to be? No, clearly not. Is he finished? I don't think he's finished. But with that type of receiver, again, he's more skilled than DK is, but in that mold of like when the athleticism goes, when he can't run anymore, it's over for him, right? Just because he's just not that type of technician. Very, very Westbrookian, if you want to think about it that way, Allen Iverson type of thing. It's like it's going to be good for a while, but when it's over, it's going to fall off a cliff. I think he's got at least another year or two of relatively productive football left in him. So I didn't mind that move. The move they trade for Laremy Tunsil, the left tackle from the Houston Texans, who by all measures has been one of the best tackles in the game for at least the last 6 or 7 years. He is on a 1-year deal, so he's going to have to get paid, and he will get paid at the absolute top of the left tackle market, which is going to be an expensive contract. Now they can also time that up to expire when Daniels is going to kick in, so like they can afford to do that. But I think if you look at that team and like where were their problems last year, it was the offensive line and the defense, and so going and getting a premier offensive tackle. For they gave up 4 picks for him, none of them first rounders, and 2 this year, 2 next year, so they spread the cost out. But I think that again, that's the type of move you can make when you're in the position they're in, where they have the rookie quarterback and the rookie dance. It's time to push the chips in. It's time to go for it right now. So good move for them there. And then the last one is they signed Javon Kinlaw, defensive lineman from San Francisco. Just another good, solid, proven veteran that will help improve that defense. They need to do more on that defense still. They need to do a lot more to get that defense to where you could say it's even a league average unit, but step in the right direction. So just, again, it's funny because they made the NFC Championship game, and I still don't want to say they're as good as like the Lions or the Eagles are. Even though they beat the dog shit out of the Lions in the playoffs.
Yep.
I would still, in my mind, have them, all things equal, like the Lions stay healthy, all that stuff, below those two teams. But these are the type of moves that are going to push, that are going to keep them in contender status until it's time to pay Jaden Daniels.
Yes.
And now the other side of that is, well, why is Laremy Tunsil? Why is he available? We're in a time where offensive line play is scarce as hell. The Titans are paying $80 million to guys that probably aren't that good, and Laremy Tunsil's available for a non-first round pick. Interesting move by the Texans there to move off Tunsil. Because if you think about the Texans last year, what was their problem?
The offensive line.
Couldn't block anybody.
Yeah, couldn't block anybody.
Anyone. They had injuries at the receiver position, and they couldn't block anybody. That was the issue. So they go ahead and trade Tunsil, which is a bit of a surprising move, but I think it's them looking at what I think likely happened is Tunsil's agent came to them this offseason and said he's not playing on a dead end deal. He's not playing on a 1-year deal. You need to extend them right now, and we would like top of the market left tackle money. And they looked at the books and go, all right, so he's going to make top of the market left tackle money. Well, CJ Stroud's contract, he needs that soon, and that's going to be top of the market. That's going to be in the $55 million range, if not more. And then Will Anderson, the defensive end, so people remember they made it where they drafted Stroud and Anderson back to back right after each other. And that's great, and they hit on it. And now we have a franchise quarterback and a franchise edge rusher, and that's fantastic. But now you got to pay him.
Yeah.
And so those guys are going to be expensive. And so I think they looked at it and said, we just don't have the space for all three of them. And Tunsil's going to be 30. I think he's still got years of really good football left in him. But they just made the calculation that we are just not going to have that kind of money available. They probably still want to bring Diggs back, I would assume. They've got Nico Collins is going to need a contract eventually. Tank Dell's going to need a contract eventually. So I think it was more so just Tunsil is not on their sort of timeline when they look at their team and how they're building it into the future. But they need to do something because you just made one of the worst offensive lines worse.
Yes.
And so all of that's great. But if Stroud has to pick his corpse off the ground a million times again this year, that's going to go bad for you. And two, it's like you still have to get his name on the paper. It's like if this guy doesn't think you can put an offensive line around him, he's getting his ass beat. Like, is he going to want to resign? So interesting to see how the Texans move forward there. I get the move, but if I was a Texans fan, I would be like, okay, but who's going to block?
Yeah.
Because somebody need to block. So interesting there. Another team that went all in on free agency this year, and we expected them to, the Patriots. We talked about them. Very similar situation to the Commanders, where they have the rookie quarterback on the deal. They think they got the guy. I'm less certain about Drake May than I am about... Like, I don't think we saw the same thing from Drake May that we saw from Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
But they have reason to believe they've got the guy, and they got $100 million, and they got a new coach. And I'm pretty sure Robert Kraft is tired of being terrible and being made fun of all the time. So they're pushing the chips in. And so they went out and they signed. Hold on, I got it here. Oh, no, did I lose my notes? Nope, we're good. So they went and signed. So my guy, Harold Landry, former Titan, obviously was with Vrabel in Tennessee. They bring him in. They bring in Carlton Davis, the corner. They bring in Milton Williams, highest paid free agent so far. Robert Spillane, another former Titan guy. And they bring in Morgan Moses on the offensive tackle. So what that tells me is they're pushing the chips in. They want to contend. I think they probably see the AFC East as maybe not gettable with the Bills there, but they can certainly be the second best team in that division, right? The Jets and the Dolphins aren't really impressing anybody. And all the money, most of the money being spent on the defense. Vrabel, obviously a defensive guy. That defense need to get a lot better. And so I would guess how they're going to go about this is they're spending the money on the defense. They're going to spend the draft capital on the offense. So they have the number 4 pick in the draft. A lot of people think they're going to take Will Campbell at LSU, offensive tackle. That would make a lot of sense. They brought in Morgan Moses, who is a fine offensive tackle, but he's older. He's like 34, 35 right now. So that's not a long-term solution. And that just seems to be kind of the way they're going to go about it. Is they're going to build this defense up. They got the quarterback, and now it's just going to be about can they put the pieces around him. They desperately need a receiver. There's just not many available.
Sure. Yeah.
Could be a Stephon Diggs spot. He doesn't strike me necessarily as Vrabel is not everybody's cup of tea. Just like and kind of like all the former Belichick guys, they kind of conducts himself like he's Belichick. Just in terms of like the no nonsense, hard assed, shut up and do your job type of approach, which works when you're Belichick and there's 6 rings in the closet. Other guys struggle with that. This is why A.J. Brown is on the Eagles, is because he did not like Mike Vrabel. And that's how that trade ended up coming to fruition. He did not like the way the Titans were doing things. So we'll see what they're able to do on the offensive side of things. But again, they've kind of did what we expected them to do. Came out, spent a bunch of money. I think Milton Williams is a really good player for them. I think he'll be productive. Robert Spillane, the linebacker, I really, really like. Again, going to be really productive. So interesting to watch in New England. I think they'll be good, but also usually the team who spends the most money in free agency also ends up being the most overhyped team coming into next season.
Yeah, of course, like you already touched on, right? Yeah.
Right. It's like everybody's like, oh my God, okay. It's like, well, these guys are available for that kind of thing. But I do think that this is what they had to do. They're pushing their chips into the middle, but they need to make moves still on the offensive side of the ball. That offensive line has to get better. Seems like they're going to address that through the draft. They need receiving talent. However they're going to go about it, probably going to have to do that in the draft as well because it's just not available to them on the market right now unless there's some other trade coming that I don't foresee. But interesting stuff out of them early on. I would say definitely one of the winners of early offseason. Team that's been kind of the opposite of the Patriots has been the Niners. We talked about them a little bit there for a second, but just an absolute sell-off of pretty much anybody on that roster outside of Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams. So they have lost Debo, he is out. Tafunga, the safety, out. Greenlaw, the linebacker, out. Charvarius Ward, the corner, out. Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback, is been told that he is likely getting cut as well. Yep. So that to me, like the fact that Juszczyk is gone, he was such a, it's funny because it's always just a fullback, but he was the one that kind of defined that team a little bit in terms of just like so impactful to what they did and how they would use him, and was sort of like the personification of that offense of we're going to take these these really smart football players that are tough, and Kyle Shanahan's going to put them in a position to succeed, and that's just how we're going to go. And that, to me, their offseason is just them having a complete departure from that. And what it tells me is they still haven't done the Purdy contract. The fact that they let all these guys walk tells me they're going to get the Purdy contract done, and people have speculated where that's going to come in at. I think it's going to come in at a number that's crazy. I think no, it's not going to be crazy based on what other quarterbacks are making and what Purdy has done. Like, I think he's going to be in the top 10, top 5 of quarterbacks. He's going to make $50 million a year, but it's probably going to be reported at 5 years, $275 million or whatever it comes out at. And people are like, oh my God, Brock Purdy for that? It's like, yeah, like, people are going to be upset about the contract, but I think the Niners have looked at it and said they kind of have to do it. And now, and it's now on John Lynch, the GM, and Kyle Shanahan you now have to retool this roster around Purdy and around an expensive quarterback, right? And that's kind of the exact opposite of how they've done it the entire time there. Mm-hmm. They have gone the other way. We're going to have an expensive roster with tons of talent, and we'll just put whoever at quarterback. And it'll be Jimmy G, or it'll be Trey Lance, or it'll be, bro, we took him last in the last pick of the draft. Throw Brock Purdy in there. It'll work. And now it seems like they're going to commit to Purdy and have to rebuild that roster, which it's just going to take time. Even if they nail all their draft picks this year, like, they're going to have to nail a couple of drafts to get that roster back into contender status. Purdy is, for the money he's going to get paid, he is not, he's kind of in that Dak world to me, where it's like, he's not going to, he can make a good team really good, but he's not making a bad team average. You know what I'm saying? He's just not that kind of guy. But I think it shows that the level of job security that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have there, where they understand that we can take a step back for a couple of years. Nobody's getting fired. The organization has faith in them. The fan base, I think, they've been so successful for the last few years. Obviously, they didn't win the Super Bowl, but they've been so competitive and so good that the fan base can probably stomach a couple of mediocre to bad seasons and kind of let them refuel that roster. So we came into the offseason thinking, okay, how are they going to handle this transition? Seems like they're just stripping it down. So we'll see kind of how they move the rest of the offseason. But in my mind, they've clearly taken a step back and are clearly going to take a step back. And that just bolsters the Rams' point of there just doesn't seem to be anybody in that division who's, the Cardinals, I guess, are trying to win now. Whether they're going to be able to, we'll see. But to me, it looks like the Niners clearly taking a step back. The Seahawks are taking a step back. And that division's right there for the taking. One more team that is interesting this offseason, not because of what they did, but because of what they have not done, and that is the Cincinnati Bengals. So as these contracts are getting announced, and we're seeing Max Crosby get a whole bunch of money, and we're seeing Myles Garrett get a whole bunch of money, and we're seeing DK Metcalf get a whole bunch of money, there is one man sitting in central Ohio, I would assume in a mansion, watching that happen and going, they better pay my boys. That is Joe Burrow, because the Cincinnati Bengals still need to pay T. Higgins, they still need to pay Jamar Chase, and they still need to pay Trey Hendrickson. Well, the wide receiver market just got reset. They're both those guys are going to want top of the market deals. I don't think Higgins is going to get it. I think it's going to be Chase. And then Hendrickson is also, there's the 3 edge contracts that need to be done this offseason are TJ Watt's extension, Michael Parsons' extension, and Trey Hendrickson's extension. Now, you could make the argument that Trey Hendrickson is not at Michael Parsons and TJ Watt's level, and sure, that's fine, but he will have so much leverage over the Bengals that I think he's going to get that type of contract. And it's something has to give in Cincinnati. They don't like paying their players. They never have. They've never done it, but they've never been big spenders. Notoriously cheap. They've already franchise tagged T. Higgins. So basically, what the franchise tag does. So, if a player's deal is expiring, you can apply a franchise tag. Every team can do it to one guy per year, and you can't do it to the same guy more than twice in a year or twice in a row. When you get tagged, it's a 1-year deal at the average of the top 5 salaries at your position. So T. Higgins is now on a 1-year, $22 million contract or something like that, but 0 guaranteed after this year. Mm-hmm. It's basically a 1-year deal, and you don't have a choice. We're tagging you. That's it. It's done. Now what that does in practicality, and this is the second they tagged T last year. They tagged him again this year. So now they can't do it again. So he is a free agent next year unless he signs an extension. That is done. If you're T. Higgins and you have a 1-year deal and still have in your mind a lot of football left in you, you are going to take zero risks this year in terms of like injury management stuff. You are not going to be like the franchise is told they didn't meet your number to keep you there long term, and so you're not going to sacrifice for the team long term. And when you've got him playing on the tag, Jamar Chase has not gotten an extension yet, so is he going to be playing on a 1-year deal, and you're going to tag him next year when you can't tag T. Higgins anymore? Trey Hendrickson, he's on a 1-year deal. All these, if there's all this uncertainty, you already are coming off a wasted MVP caliber season of Burrows. How long can this sustain itself? How long can we do this? Where you've got the franchise quarterback, but you refuse to help him. He's publicly coming out and saying you need to pay these guys. He's not being shy about it. Mm-hmm. And so you either have to pay these guys, or there's going to be problems in Cincinnati that could easily turn into a very toxic locker room, especially if Burrow is on Jamar Chase's and T. Higgins' side, which I like. You're going to have to assume he is. And so if they're not, if they're they don't show up to camp on time, or like, my hamstring's tight, I'm sitting out 3 or 4 weeks. Like, all of a sudden that season goes in the tank, and now the only asset you have hates you. It's Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
If you just tank another season to hit. And so we don't see in the NFL, like, the NBA style trade demands of, like, I don't care how bad this is for you. I don't care how hard it is. Just trade me. I'm out of here. Very few players in the NFL have the pull, to do something like that. A Joe Burrow in his prime could do something like that.
Yes, yeah.
And that would be seismic. So just got to keep an eye on Cincinnati the rest of the way here, because something has to give. Either guys are getting paid or guys are leaving. I don't see a way that they can just go into this next season with 3 of their 4 best players on 1-year deals and their best player pissed off every day about everything. Yep. That just, to me, is not tenable as a successful way to move forward, and could be if the Bengals fumbled this era of their franchise where they drafted, you nailed the number 1 overall pick, got the franchise quarterback, then you come back next year and you get the receiver who played with him in college, who he loves, and he's amazing right away. And you go to the Super Bowl and you actually have, and they just turn that into, they didn't win the Super Bowl, but they got close. They turn that into, hey, maybe all 4 of your best players are gone, and if not, like, your quarterback, whatever. That would be one of the all-time, like, fumbles. That would just be when we talk about incompetent organizations, the Bengals are. They are up again. Goes back. You are who you are before you got here. You can have that you can have that great quarterback, you can have the star players around him, but you're still the Bengals. Yeah, and you still fucked it up. So we'll see what happens there. So that is, I think, a lot of what I wanted to touch on. Tyler, is there anything else that you thought was newsworthy that we should talk about?
No, I think you kind of nailed it, honestly, man. Like, there was obviously some other trades that came out. Or some other, like, free agency moves that came out. But this is
Justin Fields to the Jets. I want to talk about that. Justin Fields to the Jets. So it looks like he's going to be their number 1. Again, that's a 1-year deal. So just kind of
that seems like, again, like a pit stop type thing, or it's just
it's not a good free agent class. It's not a good quarterback class in the draft this year.
Yeah,
there just wasn't guys available. And so now that's kind of where, like, the only guys left are Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers.
Well, I think that kind of leads to, like, what you were talking about too. Like, you're thinking the Rodgers is going to go to the Steelers when, obviously, it's very close proximity. Like, Fields going to the Jets, it seems like it's like a 1-for-1. It's not, but I'm just saying, like, once you offload like that, and then like the Jets they're like, okay, they're moving forward. It's like, hey, where's Rodgers going? Like, it really does seem like the Steelers are opening up to take Rodgers.
Well,
like,
if you think about teams who need must have a quarterback this offseason, the Giants are one. The Steelers are another, and that's kind of it now. Yeah. The Browns, I guess you could say they need to get a quarterback, but we think they're going to get Kirk. So, whereas, like, you have other teams, right? Like, go back to the Titans for an example. The Titans don't have a quarterback. Like, Will Levis is not that guy, but they don't need to go get one. Like, they could, like, the Titans are pretty much resigned to being bad again next year, so they could run it back again with Levis, and they could draft Cam Ward. Like, they don't need a quarterback, whereas, like, the Steelers and the Giants must have one, right? The only quarterback right now on the Giants roster is Tommy DeVito.
Which, I mean, would be fun.
For a year. I can't...
Fun for us, not for them.
Just a year of Tommy DeVito would that... I mean, they won't do it because Brian Dable will get fired. You know what I'm saying? He's not going to go down with Tommy DeVito. You know, he's not. You know, he's like, if I'm going down, like I'm gonna get a guy. And so that's where I think you got to assume Rodgers is going to the Steelers, and then that leaves the Giants, I guess, doing the Russell Wilson thing. But that to me means that they have to take a quarterback in the draft, which means they're probably going to have to trade up to number one, which I would obviously like because I want the Titans to trade the number one pick. So we'll see what happens there. Yeah, Fields to the Jets, Danny Dimes to the Colts.
Yep.
Interesting little one. So it's gonna be Danny Dimes and Anthony Richardson there battling that out. If you believe, like, Pat McAfee has been on the warpath, he hates Anthony Richardson. And he's obviously a very tapped in guy in Indianapolis. And basically he come out and said that if you guys he's like, Colts Nation is like torn on Anthony Richardson. Some guys like him, some guys hate him. If you guys knew what I knew, you would all hate him. And I guess whatever, the locker room doesn't like him, whatever. So I think there's zero chance that Danny Dimes ends up getting the actual job there and becomes the guy for them. Nice guy. Like, I don't know. Like he's like probably going to be in the NFL for quite a while still. I don't think he's anybody's savior. He could be an interesting Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator there, is he's good with like you could make an argument that Daniel Jones is kind of like a poor man's Anthony Richardson a little bit, where like he's big, he's actually pretty fast, the arm's real strong. Nobody knows where it's going when he lets it go.
Yep.
So you can see how that could kind of line up there and that could work. Chris Godwin back to the Bucs, so it looks like the Bucs are just going to run it back. Happy for them, happy for Baker. Interesting thing, and that one just to note too, when people come out and say, "Oh my God, Chris Godwin took a pay cut," or didn't take a pay cut, but he left money on the table to go back to Tampa. Apparently, the offers out there were higher, and just a thing people don't think about with this is maybe on paper the dollars were higher by other teams. But what you got to understand about this is these guys get taxed based on where their teams are. Mm-hmm. So if he had an offer from the Chargers in California or from the Patriots in New England, in Massachusetts, or Tampa in Florida, it's actually better to go back to Tampa, depending what the dollar, because there's no tax in Florida, right? Yeah. So that kind of stuff is just stuff that people don't necessarily think about when they're like, oh, why did that guy sign there? It's like, no state income tax.
Do you think there's also just like the old school mentality of like he just likes to play there too?
Well, yeah, there's some of that too, right? He's been there his whole career. I'm sure his kids are in school. Like and that's why I think you see a lot of these guys end up re-signing with the teams that they were with, because if the money's equal, it's just easier to go back. Mm-hmm. Right? Like you see that with Myles Garrett. Obviously, the money probably not equal, but he's like, well, it's 100 and I don't have to move and I don't have to pull my kids out of school and whatever, right? And yeah, I think you see that a lot more in football, especially too, like football players have the mentality different from definitely baseball players and basketball players of you got to get the money when you can get it because you don't know when your career can end tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Like every play could be your last, right? So like you got to, and the guaranteed money you have to get. Like if you get a high guarantee, you have to take it. And so NFL free agency is much more dominated by the money than other sports are because guys need to get paid. Quarterbacks are kind of the exception to that because they have longer careers and their contracts are almost fully guaranteed at this point. So they're a little bit different. But yeah, no, I think, like I said, I think credit to the NFL for being able to take over a news cycle whenever they feel like it. Things will die down for the next couple of weeks now. There could be some trades, some stuff like that. Things are percolating down in Dallas. So Dallas is an interesting one to watch right now. So we talked about, they restructured those contracts to create like $50 million in cap space, which, okay, some of that's going to Parsons, but like they haven't done anything else. Mm-hmm. And like, what is their plan down there? Like, what are they doing to kind of be competitive next year? And there's just been some interesting things spoken about there's, a potential trade happening in Dallas that would surprise some people. I don't know. I don't think that's Dak just because the dead money on the trade would be too much. Do they want to move Micah Parsons? Or are they looking at not paying that next mega deal and get off him and, maybe get a top pick in this year's draft or something like that. So interesting to watch what they'll do there. But yeah, I think, overall, always fun when you get a bunch of transactions in one day and not the best free agent class, but obviously a ton of moves that are going to impact this upcoming season. So we'll keep coming back as the offseason unfolds. There'll probably be more stuff to talk about next week. We'll get into draft stuff. We still got about 6 weeks out until the draft. So that's kind of the next big piece of the offseason. And then once we're through there, we can actually start to think about what these teams look like in totality, what they actually look like. Yeah, no, I think that's pretty much it if we don't have anything else there. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for all the follows, all the comments, all that stuff. So like it, subscribe it, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all that stuff. Tell your friends about it. We'll be here all off season. So make sure you tune back in. Thank you.
Electric lights on a skyscraper. It's up and down.